Okay, I'm now at the Nagoya Zoo. We're in the middle of course, the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, so the university is closed, so I'm recording these videos at various places, various spots around Nagoya, and the zoo too, of course, is closed indefinitely due to the virus, as is pretty much everything else. So I'll be walking around explaining the study guide for today's assignment, which is Kamo no Chōmei's Hōjōki, translated into English by my great advisor Anthony Hood Chambers as an account of my 10-foot square hut, and we'll be using Chambers' English translation for the exchange students in my class, and Japanese students will be reading the original and the Gendaiyaku, the modern Japanese translation, because the original is fairly difficult for modern Japanese people to read. So Kamo no Chōmei's Hōjōki. Kamo no Chōmei was born around 1155 and died in 1216, and there's more information about him on the study guide. Click on the link and it'll give you some basic information about him. Hōjōki, a sort of general introduction. Look at the study guide and click on this and it'll give you that. But I'm going to jump right now straight into the study questions and explain whatever needs explaining. I think there are 16 questions in all this time. So first question. The central symbol or phrase of the essay is kari no yado. Kari no yado. Or in English, temporary dwelling. Alright, this is a very important term in Buddhism. You see it in a lot of Japanese poems. You see it used as kind of a trope in a lot of Heian monogatari. You see it in this work, used in several instances as well. Discuss the significance of this term in both its literal meaning and metaphorical meanings. Kari no yado. Kari means temporary, right? Kari no, that which is temporary, and yado is a dwelling place. Yadori, it can be read as well. Keep in mind that the term appears frequently in pre-modern and early modern Japanese literature, as well as in Buddhist texts. Okay, fairly straightforward. Number 2. This work, Hōjōki, is overflowing with symbols, metaphors. In short, the type of literary mediation that I call in my book figurative mediation. In my book I talk about 4 types of mediation. This is one of them, the figurative, metaphoric stuff. Discuss the various images, animals, and natural phenomena that appear in the text. Here are some examples to get you started. There's foam, the utakata, that appears in the famous first line of this work. Froth, owl's call, the deer, the morning glory, dew, tsuyu, it's dew in Japanese. Pheasant songs, the cries of the monkey, fireflies in the grass, moonlight, cicadas accumulating in melting snow, hermit crab in small shell, the osprey on rugged shores, travelers, silkworm spinning in its cocoon, locusts, whitecaps trailing a ship, lavender clouds, etc. Lavender clouds, shiun in Japanese, is a famous term that appears in much of Chinese poetry as well. Keep in mind that in each case, these are not simply natural phenomenon, but are rather literary images and tropes that carry specific symbolic meanings and resonances. Okay? So make a list of all of these natural phenomenon and do your best to discern what they mean sort of in a poetic sense. Number 3, identify and discuss the various literary, cultural, religious, philosophical, and historical allusions, references that appear in the text. What I call in my book surface mediation, right? So there's 4 types of mediation. This is the second one. What function do these allusions serve? What do they reveal about the author, his age, his education, his worldview, etc.? Alright? So just as in, if you read, for example, a Murakami Haruki novel, there's all kinds of allusions to, say, American pop culture of the 1960s. When you read Japanese work from the 13th century to 12th century, you see all kinds of allusions, usually to Chinese culture, Chinese poetry, Chinese art, Chinese history. And why is this? Because the reason is because China is basically the center of the universe for the Japanese up until fairly recently. Okay. Next is the historical context. Discuss the historical context, late Heian period, early 13th century. Right. What sort of age is the narrator living in? Is he justified in describing it the way he does? Is the present being contrasted implicitly or explicitly with some better or previous or golden age, as it was done in Tsurezure Gusa, which we read in another class, right? And in that work you'll remember that the present is described as kind of a degraded, fallen present, in contrast to the great peak of the Heian period, right? And do we see a similar kind of sense of nostalgia, cultural nostalgia, that we saw from the narrator in that work? Next question, number 5. Discuss the narrator, his literary persona, his age, his social position, past and present. That's important distinction. Past, he was X, now he is Y. His disposition, his worldview, life history, family situation, view of humanity, likes and dislikes, attitude toward approaching death, current daily life, etc. Insofar as we can glean from his narrative, right? Notice that I said the narrator rather than the author. Kamo no Chōmei is the author of the work. The narrator is pretty much the same, I might say. But in general, as a general principle, you want to make a distinction between narrator and author. And this distinction, of course, is not as clear as it is in modernity, but it's still there, and you still make it when you write your essays and whatnot. Number 6. Describe the various disasters experienced by the narrator, starting with the fire of 1177, which destroyed a third of the capital. I think Professor Chambers provides a note in his text about this fire. And there are other disasters that are mentioned in the story. The whirlwind of 1180, the droughts, the floods, bad crops that led to famines, epidemics, impoverishment, rampant crime, earthquake of 1185 and its series of aftershocks, etc. Which of these calamities does he see as the most horrific? What lessons does he draw from them? Does he find any redeeming or heroic or selfless acts in this, what he calls impure, evil age? Explain. All right, and this question and this aspect of the text particularly resonates with us today, who are living in the middle of a great crisis, pandemic. Number 7. Discuss the brief relocation of the capital to Fukuhara, which is in present-day Kobe. Does the narrator regard it as a success or a failure? Why? How do his comments here relate to the main point in the first half of the essay? So this is a historical fact. When they moved to Fukuhara as a kind of experiment to relocate the capital, and the experiment failed, and they quickly moved it back to Heian. But that's some historical background you might want to look into. Number 8. Discuss the mood or theme of Mappo, Chinese say Mofa, the age of the degeneration of the Dharma. The Dharma is just a word for whole, or Buddha's law, that pervades the work.